going to trust that it was a beautiful day out there today. So yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. A quick thanks to those that have maybe found us online after this presentation. So for those of you watching it live right now, we will be posting this to our website after the presentation, and we would hope that you would share it with your friends. And if you found it and you've enjoyed it, share it with your friends as well. So sit down, relax for a bit. This will take us probably about 45 minutes if I was to guess. It kind of depends on how much Eric and I talk, and we tend to be a bit talkative. But we also have a lot of really good information that we want to share with you today. So thanks for taking the time to join us. I'll give you a quick summary of what this presentation is going to look like. I'll talk to you a little bit about what the delivery model is and the P3 model. And then I'm going to take you right down into the 66th Street details. I know a lot of you are joining today from that neighborhood, and we want to give you a good, thorough update on the work that's happening in your neighborhood. From there, I'll turn it over to Eric, and he's going to take you through some of the train system testing and give you some education on that. It's very interesting information. I think you'll enjoy that segment. And then it's going to flip back to me, and I'm going to walk you through a lot of the project features starting in the downtown area, and then I'll walk you right through to the south end of the project as well. We will touch on safety for sure, and we'll talk a little bit about how that impacts you as individuals and drivers and cyclists and so on. I also want to touch on Transed's COVID-19 response and let you know what we're doing to help protect our workforce and also the general public. And then, as Isabel mentioned previously, we will be taking questions through the duration of this presentation, and then we will answer those questions at the end. So sit down and enjoy yourself. Hopefully you've maybe got a plate of food with you, you're sitting at your kitchen table, and you're relaxed and ready to absorb some really good information. So as I promised, I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction into the P3 model. So this project is a public-private partnership. We're proud to be partners with the City of Edmonton and also with various companies. So Transed is made up of 4 companies: Bechtel, Ellis Dawn, Bombardier, and we also have a funding partner by the name of Fengate. It's a 13-kilometer long segment of the project. Of course, this is phase 1. There'll be another phase that you're, I'm sure, well aware of, the Valley Line West. That will come after this is done. But the portion that we're building is 13 kilometers long. There's 11 train stops along the way. We're going to show you some pictures of that today and give you some details. And there's one very unique elevated station combined with a 1,300 stall park and ride as well that we'll talk about today. So it's really a mixed bag type of project. And what I mean by that is there's many different aspects. It's not just a road project. It's not just an LRT rail project. It's not just a bridge. It's kind of got a little bit of everything. And that makes it really interesting and fun for those of us that are living it day to day and breathing the day-to-day construction challenges that we have. So a really big team that we have putting this together over the last few years. All right, so I'm going to take you right down into 66th Street and give you some updates on what's going on in that neighborhood. So right off the bat, I'm going to go through some roadworks updates and give you an idea of what traffic and pedestrians should expect in the coming weeks. I also want to give you a flavor of what to expect through the winter and a little bit of next year as well. We're going to talk about the overhead catenary system and give you an introduction on what that really is. I'm going to feature a little bit on the train stops that are in your neighborhood as well, and just kind of talk about the accessibility and what the ultimate configuration and look of the neighborhood will be when this area of the road of the project is complete. So roadworks update first. If you're in the Millwoods area right now, you'll likely have noticed we've recently switched traffic back onto the northbound lanes in the final alignment, we call that. So there's either 1 or 2 lanes open northbound right now, driving on top of the new asphalt and making use of that. So that's a pretty big milestone for us. We've been working hard for quite a while to get to the point where we can put traffic onto the ultimate northbound alignment. We haven't done that all the way along the alignment. You'll start to see in the next week more of that switch happening, particularly between 38th Avenue all the way up to the White Mud. What that is allowing us to do now is move into the next phase. And there are a couple more phases that you should be aware of to finish 66th Street from White Mud all the way to 28th Avenue. The southbound lanes have some additional work that has to happen right now. So because we've moved traffic onto the northbound side, that opens up a little bit of area in the middle, which allows us to finish the southbound inside or median side curb. That work will be going on, and it has started already. If you've been down there, you'll have seen some excavation beginning, and we'll be filling those holes with gravel and setting up formwork to pour the curbs fairly shortly here. Now, another thing that's very important to recognize is we have quite a bit of work still to do at the intersections. Now, the intersections are a little bit unique, and the reason I say that is obviously grade changes, elevations change at an intersection. So that's where the eastbound movements over the tracks occur, and that track alignment is very much set in relation to what's necessary for train operations. Now we need to bring in and make sure that the entirety of the intersection matches to that. And as part of that, we have to make sure that the road work is meeting city standards. Now, Mill Woods has been around for a few years, and there's been an evolution of road work in that time frame over the past decades. What we're having to do now is make sure that the underlying subgrade, we call it, of those intersections is properly built so that it properly drains water and so on. And what ends up happening at the intersection is something we call full depth reconstruction. And that is where we are very similar to what you've been seeing, having to open up a fairly deep excavation and completely rebuild the road. Now, that doesn't necessarily happen at every intersection. In some cases, the existing structure underneath the asphalt is okay, and it can stay the way it is. And we just need to do a number of lifts or layers of pavement on top of that. So that's the kind of work that's going to happen now at the intersections in multiple phases over the coming month, and really until the ground freezes. We're going to go as long as we possibly can. Now, to do that, we also want to keep traffic moving. Unfortunately, we won't be able to keep all of the lanes open while we're doing this work. So what you see right now has been changing, and what's going to happen over the next few weeks until winter freeze up is a little bit worse conditions, probably the best way to describe it. A few more lane reductions will occur at those intersections. It's a short duration, just like I say, until winter to get this stuff done as quick as possible. There is a possibility that some of that work at the intersections will not complete this year, and that will carry over into the spring and very early part of summer 2021. So we want you to be aware of that. 66th Street has been an area that we're well aware of has been under construction for a long time. It's been a unique area of the project for a few reasons. It is the area where we are building rail first. It is the area where we do a lot of our very initial commissioning, and Eric's going to talk about that shortly. And it's also an area that had some pipeline corridors that we had to cross as well, which caused duration. Basically, it just takes time to do the work around many, many pipelines that we had to cross. So all of this combined with just making sure we keep traffic open has created a fairly long duration of construction in that area. And we're well aware of that, and we are working hard to get out of that neighborhood as soon as possible and get things back to a final condition for you. So through the winter, we are aiming to have all of the lanes open. Now, it's important that you understand that we are very motivated to do that. And the reason I say that is wisely, the city has imposed lane fees upon us. So when we close lanes, we actually have to pay for that. So we're motivated to do what we can to keep lanes open whenever possible. As I just described, it's not always possible, but certainly when we have to close a lane, we try our best to get in and get out as quickly as we can, with constraints like weather, of course, that makes that difficult at times. So we're making sure that what happens over the winter is all of the lanes open up again. We don't want to be stuck in a situation where we've closed lanes and are impacting traffic flows for the duration of the winter. So you can expect us to work hard over the next few weeks and have lanes reopen by the time the snow flies. Now, in 2021, like I mentioned before, there is a likelihood that some of the work at the intersections and a few other localized areas will carry over until the spring and the summer of 2021. So expect that, and you should also expect some of the top lift or the final lift paving to occur also next spring. All right, moving on now to a little bit about the overhead catenary system. You've seen this infrastructure being constructed out there by our partners Bombardier for the last many months. It's important, and Eric is going to talk about this in more detail, but it's important that you understand that these wires are about to go live. They are going to be energized in roughly about 2 weeks. That will encompass the vast majority of the alignment between Whitemud all the way to 28th Avenue. So be aware that they're live. Obviously, don't go near power lines when they're live, and there's certain safety messaging that we want you to be aware of that we're putting on our website, and you'll see social media posts that highlight some of those safety risks as well as we move along. Now, what that does do, though, is allows us to get trains under their own power testing on 66th Street. Some of you may have seen the trains do that in the past. We have had power turned on for brief periods of time just when necessary to do some of that testing. You'll start to see a lot more of that as we move along. And again, Eric will talk about that in more detail. The next slide here, you'll see, like I promised, some pictures of the stops in the Millwoods area. So we have some pictures here of the Millwoods stop, the Woodvale, and also the Grey Nun stops. Lots of progress has happened in the last few weeks and months in those areas. They're starting to look like nice LRV and LRT stops. You'll see the structures going up now, and you'll start to see some of the shelter enclosures coming to life as well. It's important to note those shelters are going to be heated, something new for the Edmonton transit system. One of the things I'll point out here also is just to be aware of those silver cabinets that are on the stops. That gives you an indication that our commissioning and cable pulling activities is underway. So obviously we're pulling a lot of cables through conduits that are under the ground that you don't really see, and it's difficult to see the progress of that work just simply because it's underground. But when you see a cabinet go in, that tells you that cables can now be pulled up through those ducts and into the cabinet, and some of those cable terminations can begin, which is really the first step to a lot of the commissioning activities that we're undertaking. All right, moving on then, just to give you a quick look at some of the unique aspects of traffic movements on 66th Street, and really these apply to a lot of different intersections along the entire 13 kilometers of the project. What I wanted to point out here at 34th Avenue, though, is something about the right turn bay or the right turn lane. So if you think about anybody turning right from northbound 66th Street, normally at a traffic intersection, you can turn right when it's safe to do so. So you wait for a green or a red light, but as long as there's no traffic, you're able to make that right turn movement. In the situation here where we have the LRT running adjacent to the roadway, it's important to note that that right turn bay is controlled by an individual signal dedicated to that turn lane. It's important that when you're driving there that you follow that signal. And the reason for that is, as you can see kind of by this drawing on the screen, if you're turning right, a train may be coming from behind you, approaching from the rear. And that can be difficult to see at times. So to control that, we make sure that if a train is coming, we turn that right turn bay into a stop phase, or we put a stop light, a red light up there to make sure that that movement is not made by the vehicles. So please just make sure you're watching for that as the trains start to operate and as we get used to this new system. Everything else about that intersection is pretty normal. I wanted to flip over to 28th Ave and just show you this one. And really, of course, you live in the area, a lot of you that are watching this and listening right now. But it's unique that 28th Avenue, the LRT tracks cross the intersection before you get to the lights. So you'll start to see as the final lift paving goes in that area where the stop bar is located. You'll notice that it's stopped. You'll stop in advance of the tracks. So again, really the story I want to leave you with is when you come upon any of our intersections, as a driver, as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, just make sure you're following the normal road rules and you'll be perfectly safe. The system is designed in such a way that you're following a traffic signal the same way you would at any other intersection in the city. Similar with stop signs, yield signs, pedestrian crossings, all of those things. There's really nothing unique for the drivers when it comes to integrating and working or being a driver integrated with the LRT moving beside you. And we'll talk in more detail, I think, about how the trains operate in commission as we move along here. And there's some things I have in mind that if we don't cover it in Eric's section, I'll make sure I jump in and add some flavor to some of those topics. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric now from Bombardier. He's going to walk you through some of the train systems and testing updates and really give you some good technical knowledge of what we're going to be doing really for the next few months and through the winter. So take it away, Eric. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Dallas. Great stuff that you're presenting. So what I want everybody to know is that we're received train number 16. So we've got more of half of the fleet in the city right now. So our train number 16 out of 26. We have actually train 17 and 18, which have already left the station from Kingston, where the trains are manufactured. So they're on their way right now to Edmonton. And you notice that the trains are actually being transported by rail. And they're transported in a special bed that's over, a track bed vehicles, and to bring it all the way across the plain, to bring it all the way to Edmonton. So it's a very good way of bringing it. It doesn't take us too long, about 2 weeks usually, to bring a train to its final home. And once we actually arrive in Edmonton, the train is actually transferred from the train bed that it is on to an actual truck. And then it's going to make its way to White Mud and all the way into the OMF, which is at the crossing of 51 and 66. So really, really an interesting process. Typically, we do that at nighttime in order not to disturb, a lot of people, and to give ourselves enough room to maneuver because it's still a fairly long vehicle. It's a seven-car train. Can you go to the next one? So you probably have seen last week, a train going with those nice earmuffs, or basically those are actually dynamic envelope clearance, and basically with this we verify that there's no encroachment between the vehicle and any adjacent structures or surfaces. So we're typically doing that before running the trains, making sure that everything is okay and that we have all those proper clearances. We look at, of course, the worst case conditions of what could happen. So for sure that it will not happen during operation. And you can see a little bit the look that it will have once the train actually comes in the station. So from that perspective, it's really, really interesting to see. And you probably will see more events like that. But what we did last week is we went from all the way from White Mud and all the way to 28th Street to verify that we were okay both on both lanes all the way through. So that's one very important step. The next step that we will have is that we will bring the trains on the line, and then we'll actually raise the pantograph to contact the OCS wire, so the overhead catenary system wire, in order to bring power to the vehicle. We'll do some basic verification to check the vehicles, and we'll do that with a couple of trains at the beginning, and then we'll bring more. And then after that, we'll start our dynamic testing of the vehicles. So at first, we'll be going fairly slow. And as we run more and more the trains, it will increase the speed and will increase the operation to within the type of parameters that we would normally be operating in normal operation. So that means that you will be seeing those vehicles going back and forth. One comment that's very important is that, those trains are electrical. They're fairly silent. So, if you're not really looking directly at them, you will not necessarily notice that they're there. So really, really be careful and be self-aware. Look both sides before you go through crossings. If you are in a vehicle, be very attentive as well. Our drivers are trained to take care and ensure that everybody is safe. But if you go and cut too close to those vehicles are fairly heavy. So they take a long time to stop. And it's a little bit like a truck, right? So if a truck goes fast enough and you kind of cut it at the last minute, well, they may not have the time to actually stop in time. So it's the same kind of principle. So you have to apply the same level of care that you would, with normal driving, and maybe a little bit more because those are actually heavy pieces of equipment. And our drivers are really, really attuned to everything that surrounds them, but they cannot predict, someone coming right a feet or two in front of them. So we have to take care about that. Another thing also to note is the power, and Dallas mentioned it a little bit earlier. We will put the power on the OCS. So basically, those are the wires that you see over the train. This is what is actually allowing the train to move. So we're talking about high voltage here. It has the potential to hurt people if you're trying to touch it. So of course, we don't want anybody to even try that. And always apply caution. Also, one of the things that we would like for everybody to observe is that you give the train space. keep an area around that train. I know it's very interesting. You may be interested and tempted to go very, very close to have a look at it. The people are actually trying to do everything they can to keep everybody safe. So please, look at it from a distance. Make sure that the team can actually do their job, and I think you'll be very happy with the end result, because we'll have a system that will be quite performant. Now, there's a lot of steps that we have to do. Some of it, like Dallas mentioned, you're not really seeing. So we have a lot of underground cabling and other equipment. So we're talking about the heating system within the stops, but there's also other pieces of equipment that are there that will be commissioned as well. So those are not as visible on the train, but it's also happening, and in your area, you will have the benefit of seeing more of the trains for a bit longer before we actually start revenue service, because we have to start from this whole area and move our way to downtown, and we're going to do that from step by step, going all the way through the whole system. So go to the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So it comes back
Isabel,
to me.
Just before you jump in there, Isabel, I wanted to, if we can go back to that slide just for a second. Some of the things that Eric talked about, I wanted to make sure people are aware of too when it comes to safety around the intersection. So when the trains first start to go through the intersection, we will have flag people out there, and we'll make sure that it's, people are really aware of that happening. It's obviously new to drivers in the neighborhood when a train comes through there. Over time, that will become very normal, but to increase the safety, we'll have flag people out there for sure to make sure that everyone's aware the train is coming. As we move along, the traffic signals will become commissioned. So right now, you'll probably notice that a lot of our traffic signals along the entire alignment are hanging from wooden poles and temporary cables. Yet we have a lot of the permanent poles and davit arms up, and a lot of the fixtures up but covered. So we'll start to commission that infrastructure through the winter here as well. And as those commissioning activities occur with our partners at EPCOR, those signals will become active and so on. Now, like I said before, just keep following the signals. Whether it's hanging on a temporary wire or if it's mounted from the permanent pole, there'll always be a signal there operating, and just follow that. Now, some of the questions we get when it comes to intersection movements and how the train interacts with vehicles, I wanted to address here. It's important to understand that, first of all, the train control system that we're operating here is known as line of sight. And you heard Eric talk about drivers. So there is drivers in these vehicles. You may have traveled to other communities and cities and ridden on LRT systems that are fully automated. This system is not. We do have a driver, and that driver is in full control of the vehicle at all times. And we're relying on his or her ability to look out the window and really react to the things around them, including following signals and so on that are part of the system for the train. Now, when we talk about a train approaching an intersection and we talk about partial priority, the easiest way to describe this is to understand that the system is designed in such a way that when there's a green phase for, let's call it the north and south movement on 66th Street, vehicles obviously on the opposing cross streets, east-west, are at a stoplight and they're waiting. The system's designed in such a way that while the vehicles on the north-south are getting the green phase, so is the train. That means the train is going through, frankly, at a shorter duration than that entire length of the green phase. So as a driver on an opposing cross street, stopping at a stoplight, you'll see vehicles crossing like you would in any other intersection that's active, obviously. And at the same time, during that, often a train will come through at the same time. Now, occasionally, the train may be delayed at a stop and leave a little bit late, let's say, and it may approach an intersection and it may get there too late. It may even get there too early. In some cases, when that happens, the train will have to stop and wait until it gets a green phase, just like the rest of the traffic. In other words, it's not going to automatically turn everything to a red for the east-west movement. It will have to wait for that phase to clear and wait for its time to have a green phase in the north-south movement. So that's what we mean by partial priority. There's a lot more technical to it, but I just wanted to give that bit of a overview of how this train operates and how it's a little different than other intersections in the city with the rest of the ETS LRT system. All right, Isabel, you can give a reminder on the questions now.
Hi, thanks, Dallas. Just one clarification that Eric had mentioned the trains go to the OMF. That's the operations and maintenance facility where the trains will have their permanent home. Yeah, reminder to please submit your questions, comments through the Q&A section. I've seen some questions that are coming in that are really great and will be passed on to Dallas and Eric at the end of the presentation. And just again, a reminder that if you're on your phone or your tablet, it will just be the second from the right-hand side. You'll see a Q&A there. And if you're on your desktop or laptop, please exit the full screen mode. And then on your top left, you should see a Q&A. And once you click on that, you'll be able to submit a question or comment. Thanks. And back to you, Dallas.
All right, and also just a quick note for those of you that are tuning in after the fact, you can go to our website and there is links on our website to ask questions of our communications department, and they will get back to you with answers as well if you're watching this and it's not September 30th, which is when we're broadcasting this right now. All right, so I promised I was going to take you through some of the other project features. I'm going to start in the downtown area and take you all the way back to the south where we just were. So starting in downtown, one of the things that I'm really proud of and really think is a really beautiful thing that the city has chosen to do, and that is to turn 102nd Avenue into a paving stone streetscape. So all of the sidewalks, all of the road surface is entirely constructed along 102nd Avenue using paving stones. Now, our designers, our architectural experts have chosen patterns and colors that complement the area, but also contrast each other. So what I mean by that is the sidewalk is a different color, obviously, than the roadway. Even the line painting that you would normally see painted on the asphalt around the city is used using colored paving stones instead. So there's architectural patterning. There's an awful lot of benches that are built into the design, specialized lighting, planting beds for vegetation all along this corridor. So all the way from 103rd Street to 95th Street is where you can go down now. And if you're interested, you can walk down 102nd Avenue. You can see this coming to life. So we show that in the pictures here a little bit. These intersections were completed last year. We're working hard to get very close, if not completely done, all of the paving stones along 102nd Avenue before winter hits this year. But certainly going down there, you get a good feel of what it looks like. Moving a little bit further to the this will be the east end of 102nd Avenue. This is just beyond or just beside 95th Street. And what we're looking at here is on the left-hand side of your screen is the tunnel portal that leads down into our tunnel, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But this is the Chinese structure that we've constructed and the city has asked us to build that is complementary of the Chinatown area that we're building within here. So you can see the rendering up above in the top right, and you can see the structure in real time coming down below. This photo was taken today, so you can see that particular street. There is one lane of traffic in front of the residences along this area that is currently closed. So we're really thankful for the residents of the Chinese Elders Mansion that have allowed us to close the street while we can finish this work. We built it in 2 phases. In the foreground of your picture is the first phase, and we're working on the second phase right now, and we'll have that completed before the winter as well. But again, just more paving stones, and this is the tunnel portal where the trains will exit from our tunnel. So our next slide is the tunnel. So the photos you see here are showing you the current status of the tunnel as well. So all of the concrete work, all of the actual mining that we called it, is complete. We are now at the point where we're installing the physical system. So much like Eric was talking about, cabling that is underground, a lot of that is strung through the conduits that you see in the picture on the right. We're also installing the rail through the tunnel. That's ongoing right now as well. The picture in the bottom left is just to show you what the tunnel looked like probably about 6 or 8 months ago. What you're looking at is that orange liner is in fact that. It's a liner. It's a waterproofing liner. So that is tucked in behind the final concrete liner. And that's, again, obviously kind of like it sounds, to keep the water out of the tunnel. But we thought it'd be interesting to show that aspect. You can see some of the rebar was being installed at the time of that photo as well. Okay, so the tunnel itself runs from the north side of the riverbank under 95th Street and then comes up into Chinatown like I was showing before. Now, crossing the river is the feature bridge. This is the Dewatenau Bridge. This is an Extrado style structure, very similar to a cable stay bridge. The towers generally are shorter in an Extrado style. The cables themselves lay a little flatter. and they pull tension into the concrete is one way of describing it. So I won't go into the technical detail of that, but I will compliment the city and their style that they chose here. So it was complementary to the scale of the river valley. And what I mean by that is when you look at the bridge with, and although you can't really see it in the picture here, but if you look at it with the skyline in the background, you can see that the bridge fits very well with the scale of the overall postcard view of downtown Edmonton. And if you've seen it lately, you might even see it at night with some lights shining on it. It is a beautiful structure, and we're really proud of it. Now, we've hit a recent milestone on this bridge as well very recently. On September 10th, we finished the concrete deck connection, which is right where the crane is sticking in the right-hand photo. You can see some steel structure there. That's a traveler formwork, and that actually was taken on the day of our very last concrete pour. Now, this is an important milestone for the bridge because it allows a few things to happen after it that are kind of, I'll call them diverging. So what I mean by that is, and I know I say that a lot, I say, what do I mean? What I mean though, on top of the bridge structure, we can now move to a stage where we're installing the rail for the LRT. Below the concrete structure, we can now begin installing the sidewalk and the underslung shared use pathway, or SUP. That work is going to begin very shortly and occur throughout the winter. Now, this is a great indication of the status of the project. When you watch the progress of this bridge, what will happen through the winter is a lot of work on top that you can't really see where we install the rail. That will be followed by a lot of the communications ductwork and cabling, and ultimately you'll start to see the OCS poles go up and those cables be strung across the bridge as well. Now, underneath the bridge, you'll see the walkway being constructed using cranes working off of these river berms that you see in the photo. Once we connect the underslung sidewalk from one end to the other, we'll be able to remove those river berms. That will happen late into the winter. Once those river berms are out, that allows us to start establishing the parks on either side of the bridge. So on the south side is Henrietta Muir Park, and on the north side is Louise McKinney Park. Those will be reconstructed and the trail system reconnected, all the vegetation replanted in the spring and early part of next summer. So you'll see all these different phases, the sidewalk going in, the berms coming out, and the planting going in the next few months. Once the planting goes in and once we're able to reconnect those trails is when we'll be able to actually open up this sidewalk underneath the bridge and reestablish pedestrian crossing at this location. So keep watching that. You'll see this progress happen over the coming months. All right, moving just a little bit further south of the bridge is our first look at the elevated guideway. And that's what we call the raised portion of the LRT tracks. What I like to mention on this slide is kind of like I mentioned before with the trains, we have a driver. It has a windshield. Surprise, you got to see out the vehicle. What's different on these cars that Bombardier is supplying to the city compared to the current LRT cars is that you can stand at the front of the car and you can look through a window and into the cab where the driver sits and really over the shoulder of the driver, and you can see out the front of the train. So what you see in the left-hand view here, although the rail is missing from this photo, that is roughly the view that you'll see when you're looking when you're looking outside the window of the train. So that's something that's going to be unique, and I think a lot of fun for riders of the LRT system to see where you're going and get the perspective that the driver has. All right, moving a little further now along, you'll come to the Mudart stop. This is just outside of the Mudart Conservatory. You can see that in the upper left photo. The stop here is advancing really well. We'll start installing the steel structures for the shelters very shortly. You can see here in the photo, if you're looking closely, you'll notice that concrete is not gray. It's actually a colored concrete, and that's typical at all of our stops along the alignment. We've used colored concrete. Just another beautification way. Isabel, can you confirm you can still hear me? Because my computer just went to sleep.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, good. I just got my slides back on the screen, so I'll keep going. All right, let's move to the next slide. We're going to head up Connors Hill now. This first bridge that you come to is the Kahasiniskuk Bridge, and I'll say that again, the Kahasiniskuk Bridge. This is a pedestrian bridge over top of Connors Road. It replaces a previous pedestrian crossing there as well. That pedestrian crossing was a little too short. We needed to raise it in order to be able to get the train to go underneath it. You can see in the bottom left photo the concrete structure where the tracks will go underneath this structure. And of course, you can see the unique shape of this bridge as well. We opened this bridge to its final surfacing. Basically, we did the final asphalt paving just in the last few days. On Tuesday, it opened up to pedestrians, and we're really happy to see that open, and any of the River Valley users of the trails and so on can now cross this new structure. Going a little bit further now, we're at the top of Connors Hill, and we've now made a turn, and we're on to 95th Avenue. This work was largely completed last year. You may recall that we had closed this street in order to get in and get out as quickly as possible to build the entire roadway, realign things, and come through with the track. So this is just a photo to show you some of the landscaping that has happened in this area as well. And you can see the OCS poles have been installed. This picture is a few weeks old, I think now. We've started to install some of the jewelry, as Eric likes to call it, that hangs off of these poles and that will support the OCS cables. One thing I'll point out here is the amount of landscaping on this project is absolutely immense and really well done. So I have to give a kudos again to the city for making the investment into landscaping. So to tell you the investment that they've made here, we've got 85,000 shrubs that we're planting along 13 kilometers. You can see a few of them in the photo here. And we have over 10,000 trees that we're planting as well. Now, these landscaping planting beds are all over the alignment, and you'll see them. You probably have seen them. A lot of them are being installed right now. The planting is done in such a way that there's patterning built into the species that are chosen. There's attention paid to the actual tone and the shade of the green, and perhaps some of the other colors beyond green foliage as well, so that even in the winter, when the leaves drop, there's still some level of color and differentiation within our planting beds, just to bring a little bit more color to our rather white and somewhat brown winters here in Edmonton. All right, moving along. What we're looking at here is what used to be the traffic circle at Bonnie Doon, and this is Connors Hill, or Connors Road, pardon me, and 85th Street. Now, this traffic circle was removed last year, and we're now at the point where we're just doing some of the final connections. The photos that you're seeing here is a service road right in front of the ambulance bay that is in that location as well, and we're really happy to see the very close to completion of this intersection here as well. So if you've been in that area, it's been this way long enough that you probably don't even remember there being a traffic circle. That's probably a bit of a stretch. It was there for many, many years. But yeah, we're progressing nicely at this location. Moving a little bit further now to the south, actually quite a bit further to the south, we've now skipped past Bonnie Doon Mall and 83rd Street, which I'll just talk about briefly. A lot of that work was also completed in the last few years. We've most recently, in the last couple of weeks, done the final lift of paving between White Avenue at 82nd Avenue all the way down to Argyle Road. That work is now complete. You've seen a lot of the track work going on there in the last little bit as well. The OCS poles have been installed there, and the retaining walls at Argyle Road, where the track goes up and over Argyle Road, is also well established at this point as well. So once you at Argyle Road are on the train and you've gone up over Argyle Road, you've now gone on to the second elevated guideway on the project. This is the longer one. This is roughly 1.2 kilometers long of elevated guideway section. You can see a lot of that in the photos here. That elevated portion takes you over Argyle Road. It also takes you over to heavy rail tracks for CN and CP. It takes you over Wagner Park, which is near Wagner School, and it also takes you over top of 75th Ave. So all of these are busy corridors. Obviously, with heavy rail, we need to create a separation. We can't have our tracks crossing their tracks at the same level for obvious reasons. So the city chose to go elevated in this portion. And that's the reason that we've now got an elevated station. So this is the Davies station. If you've been on 75th Street, which I imagine many of you have, you've seen this station really come to life this year. We're at the point now where we're installing the glass along the sides of it. You can see in the bottom left corner that the decorative wooden roof is complete. That's made up of thousands upon thousands of individual, locally sourced pieces of lumber that have been individually treated and literally individually nailed into place. Really beautiful and unique looking structure when you're inside. We're really excited to show that off. Just to give you an idea, if you look at the top left photo, you can see that the station itself is kind of aligned to point towards downtown. So if you combine that picture in your mind with the picture below it, although you can't see it in that photo, if you stand near the end of the station and you can see the skyline in your distance, framed by this wooden roof. It's absolutely picturesque, and it will be a postcard, I'm certain, for many of you. When you get out there and see the station, you'll definitely want to take a picture of that. Now, this station is also integrated, if you just go back for a sec, sorry. This station is integrated with a park and ride facility. So surrounding, first of all, the station will be a transit center where buses will come and go. But in and amongst this entire area is 1,300 parking stalls for vehicles. So it is a great park and ride location for the city. It will have taxi drop-off as well, kiss and ride for drop-off. If you're taking somebody as a loved one, you need to drop them off. They'll have facilities for that as well. So really busy spot. We are in the midst of doing that parking lot work right now. A lot of the area has been paved already, and it will be close to wrapping up before the season ends this year. All right. You heard Eric and Isabel talk about the OMF, or the Operations and Maintenance Facility. That's what you're looking at in this photo. If you've been on White Mud anytime soon or recently, you would have seen this building come into life in the last few years. It's the big blue and gray structure that you see when you're driving by. Now, this is where the entire system is operated from. There is a control room here that will manage the trains along the entire Valley Line, as well as a storage facility for the 26 trains that are coming in for this phase. As Eric mentioned before, there's a good number of them, 16 of them, that are in the building already. I've seen them personally. They are just beautiful. It's really, really neat to see the trains inside this facility. It's absolutely immense. It's hard to show the scale of it just from these photos, but it is a big, big building. Inside this building is obviously the maintenance bays for working on the trains. There is facilities to wash the cars, and obviously facilities to store the cars. All right. Do we have pictures of the inside of it? I can't remember, Isabel, if we did or not.
No, these pictures can be found on our website, though.
Great plug. We have a great website if you want to check out any of our construction notices. If you need any kind of information about what's happening day to day, that's a great place to check out. All right, the stops a little bit. We wanted to show you a bit more of a sampling of the stops, and I realize they look very similar. What I wanted to point out, though, is we have some variation in the styles of stops that are integrated into the system. We have some that are center running, some where the station is entirely sandwiched between two driving lanes of traffic. We have others where the station or stop, is off to the side of the road, like you see in Mill Woods. And we have some where there's actually a split, where the corridor is narrow. So for instance, 83rd Street, it's not a very wide area to build the tracks through. We have taken a northbound stop on one side of an intersection, and then we've staggered the southbound stop, or the inbound versus the outbound train movements, on opposing sides of an intersection. And that just allows things to be a little bit more narrow when we're building. So just wanted to highlight that. Moving on to the next slide then. I promised that I would talk about safety. So we've kind of talked about safety early on when we mentioned being around the trains as they start to commission. Really good points that Eric was making. We've talked about, following the traffic signals just like you would any other place you drive in the city. Really just want to reiterate that here. We're going to be turning on a lot of new signals. There are intersections that didn't previously have a traffic signal, so make sure you're aware of that. You can certainly see the infrastructure coming to life right now, just not turned on, so that gives you an indication of where there will soon be a signalized intersection. We want to point out these green signs you see all along our alignment. Make sure that if you're out there as a pedestrian that you're following the designated walkways. We want to make sure that you're kept safe. We also want to make sure that you're not going into areas that are active construction sites. It's 13 kilometers long, and we are working at every meter along that 13 kilometers right now. So it's very important that you stay within the designated walkways and that you don't cross through fences or barricades or caution ribbon or red danger ribbon. All of that is all there to protect you. So please make sure you're following that. There's, of course, stop signs and various things integrated with our traffic controls. Just make sure you're following them. All right. Now, I think we wanted to talk about COVID next. So COVID obviously has been a challenge for all of us. We're living it every day, as I'm sure you are. I have to take a moment, though, just to really thank our crews. The fact that they've worked an entire summer and had to wear face coverings whenever they were within 2 meters is really a testament to their abilities, first of all, but also their attention to making sure that they're keeping themselves safe, which then keeps their coworkers safe, which also helps to keep their families safe and ultimately keeps the general population safe. So at the forefront, or the core of our program to keep people safe, is really to follow the AHS guidelines. We appreciate so much Dr. Henshaw and the guidance that she's given to the province, and we rely upon that as contractors, making sure that we're doing the things that she's recommending to keep our crews safe. Some of those things that we've been doing is providing pocket-sized hand sanitizer bottles. You can see that in the top left photo, to our crews so that they can have that on their person and use it whenever it's necessary. We, of course, have many safety meetings, always do in construction. We've tacked on additional safety meetings just to highlight and talk about COVID protective measures that our crews must follow. We have on-site nurses. We always had an on-site nurse. We've increased the nursing staff on our site just to make sure that we've got a resource to our crews to be able to reach out and have conversations confidentially through a medical professional about COVID and anything that might be affecting them. So really love our nursing staff. We have about 3 of them on site any given day. We also have increased our full-time cleaning crews. We have crews that are dedicated just to go along the alignment and take care of our washroom facilities, take care of our lunchrooms, all the offices, just anywhere there's a touch surface. And so just want to give a good kudos to that as well. And then just so you're aware, we have made it mandatory for face coverings on our project. Now that is applicable when workers are not able to maintain the 2 meters physical distancing. So kudos again. We have, obviously there's always enforcement. We always have to be reminding people to wear their coverings. Sometimes people forget. We just gently remind them, and they always have a mask with them and they put that on. But just want to highlight that sometimes when you're driving down the alignment, if you see somebody that's not wearing a mask, the next question to ask is make sure that they're, are they within 2 meters? We would hope that if they're not wearing a mask, that certainly they're more than 2 meters apart. But if they're close together, we absolutely expect them to be wearing masks. All right.
Okay.
Turn it back to Isabel.
Yeah, thank you, Dallas and Eric. We always appreciate you guys taking us through a lot of the things that we didn't know about the project. So I have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one, and I think there have been a few around this, is for Dallas. If you could give an expected time for the completion of 28th Avenue intersection and maybe any of the work that's remaining in that area.
Yeah, so 28th Avenue intersection, I actually had a conversation with our team this morning about that. We're hoping to be able to move into that area late next week to do some additional traffic phase flipping to complete that work. It is one of the areas that is not necessarily going to happen this year. We hope that it will, but I can't make any promises to you right now. Certainly if the weather holds, we'll have a much better chance of doing that. But based on various priorities along the entirety of 66th Street from 28th Ave all the way to White Mud, that intersection itself may have to take a back seat to next year. Now, like I mentioned before, we are committed to reopening lanes and making sure that there's always minimum 2 lanes on the northbound and southbound and minimum 1 lane in each direction, east and west. That I can assure you will make sure is done for the winter. 28th Ave itself, you probably have noticed that there's some work happening on the north side of the roadway. Some people probably have asked the question, what are they digging right beside the curb for? And I never mentioned it before. I thought it's probably worth mentioning now. What those are is something called a soil cell. And what that is water retention as part of our stormwater management system along the project. And what that's there for is to temporarily store water within those cells to allow it to be discharged at a controlled rate so as not to overwhelm the existing sanitary and storm system. So we're installing those cells. That's one of the last things we do once the curb and gutter and so on is done. So we're tying all of that in. A lot of that is happening on the north side of 28th Ave as we speak.
Okay, thanks, Dallas. Next one here is for Eric. How fast will the trains be going?
Well, that's an excellent question. So the trains are designed to go as fast as 80 kilometers an hour, but it will operate probably going 50 kilometers an hour.
Oh, Eric, we lost you for just a split second there. Could you just go back to the first sentence?
Okay, so I apologize for that. So as I was saying, the train can go as fast as 80 kilometers an hour. It's been tested and verified to go at that speed, but it will nominally operate around 50 kilometers an hour, or basically whatever the speed of the traffic is in the different zones. So from that perspective, you can expect that when we start the testing, we'll be going slow. So we'll be crawling. We'll be making sure that we have all the elements, in place and no interference from anything. So you'll be going probably 30 kilometers an hour or so. But as we advance in time, then we will increase the speed of the vehicle, and you'll start seeing some vehicles going in one direction. Only one at a time. They'll be doing some shuttling, so basically going back and forth on the same line. But then after that, we'll be doing the same on the second direction, so basically on both tracks. And eventually you'll see what we call pinch loops. So the vehicles are going to be going in one direction, then going at the end, then switching and going in the other direction. And they'll have a little bit of a ballet for a while to really get that system running and to test those switches and those different elements of the operation.
Isabel, if I could just add something that dawned on me that Eric and I have neglected to mention, actually, I think in this presentation, is this is a low floor LRT system. And what we mean by that is the trains themselves sit closer to the ground. And as a result, the stop platforms themselves are much closer to the ground, just basically the height of a curb, very similar to any given bus stop along the alignment. So they're low floor, and they're also very integrated with the neighborhood. And that was done intentionally and chosen by the city. And when we say integrated with the neighborhood, it's not just the design and the aesthetics of it, but it's also the speed that these trains operate. So as Eric mentioned, they will go generally the speed of traffic in that area as well. So as an example, in downtown on 102nd Avenue, it's a very congested area, a lot of people moving about. The trains will not move very quickly through downtown. Again, like I mentioned before, they're line of sight operations. So the operator of that train is very aware of all of the surrounding people, cars, vehicles in that downtown corridor, and will operate the train at a safe speed given all of those constraints and considerations.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, will the pedestrian access path between 34th and 31st be paved again?
So I'm going to assume that you're talking about the temporary asphalt one on the west side of the roadway. At this point, no, there is not plans to do that. Certainly, if there are concerns, I can bring that up. And I think, Isabel, if you wouldn't mind making a note, we'll check with our traffic group to make sure that if there are some rough areas that have over time deteriorated, we do want to make sure that's safe for the winter. So I appreciate you bringing that question forward, but I can confirm at this point, there is not plans to repave that other than isolated areas that may be deteriorating right now.
Okay. And what is the timeline for switching the traffic alignment from 95th Ave West to Connors Road North to its permanent alignment?
From 95th Ave West. Say that one more time for me, Isabel, sorry.
It's the evening, it's fine. 95th Ave West to Connors Road North to its permanent. Right.
Okay. So yeah, we're talking in the area, near the riverbank, or as close to the west as we can. So the timeline for that is anticipated by the end of this season as well. So right now, what you see happening in there is the very last area of our trackway construction. It's in fact the very last area where we'll connect the rail in the coming weeks here. There was a concrete pour going on there this morning even. So once that work is done, the crews will move out of that area. There's a little bit of road work tie-in to do. And my understanding is that, like I say, will be done for this fall.
Okay. Lots of questions coming in here. So Dallas, could you give us any timeline for when you think the 66th Street Bridge over White Mud will have more lanes open?
Yeah, good question. And I apologize for not mentioning that earlier when we were talking about the traffic update. So I can tell you right now, that bridge has been a bit of a challenge. It's a rehabilitation project as part of the overall LRT Valley Line project. So I'd mentioned a mixed bag of construction at the beginning of this presentation. That is one of the unique aspects of this contract, where we have to go into the existing structure, overpass, and do a lot of rehab on it, much like you see done on various bridges around the city over time. It's had some surprises along the way, as most rehabilitation projects do, which has caused some delays for us and additional work that we've had to take on and do. We want to make sure that it's done properly and that it's fully ready to last many, many more years. That's the whole purpose of a rehabilitation. So we recognize it's taken a while to get to the phase that we're at right now, but we are happy to report that our plan right now is to pave the top deck surfacing, the asphalt pavement, next Thursday is the plan right now, weather permitting. That will allow us to move to the next phases. We're still in discussions with our partners at the city and our subcontractors that are doing that work to determine whether or not it makes sense to move to the next phase, which is the eastern half of the bridge, or a little bit less than half of the bridge this fall. It's got a whole lot less work that has to be done to it compared to the first phase, but we are still deciding whether or not that makes sense or whether or not we need to come back next year to do that. Back to the points I was making before, I can assure you that we will have the lanes reopened for the winter, much like it's been for the last few winters. I just can't guarantee that we won't have to close some additional lanes next spring.
Okay. And for one last question before we let everyone go, a little bit of a fun one here. What is going to be one of the most wow features you think riders are going to see? And I'll start with Eric when they're on the train.
Well, I think one of the wildest features is going to be the ability to go down Corners Hill and, doing that in the evening, looking through the windows and seeing the cityscape and going close to the bridge and crossing that bridge and getting in a tunnel. I think that's going to be really, really wild. It's going to be really good. It's going to be a very, very nice system, and with all the lighting and all the landscaping that will be done, it'll be something sweet to the eyes to actually experience.
And what about you, Dallas? What do you think is going to be one of the most wow features that you think riders are going to see when they're on the train?
Well, I think the train itself. So I'm a little surprised Eric didn't mention that, but of course he's very used to his train. For me, I absolutely just adore that train. That is just so sleek looking to me, and even some of the feedback we've gotten from the public when they've been out there to see it. We've had it on display a couple times in the last year, but there's been a lot of people making comments that it's just really beautiful. We put social media posting out there when the train has been doing some of its testing, and the feedback we get always is how beautiful that train is and how good it looks. I think people will just fall in love with it. I really do. Absolutely, what Eric talks about, the river valley view and the postcard views that I talked about are going to be really neat, and really I think you'll see a lot of that showing up on people's social media feeds when this train goes into operation as well. So Isabel, if I can take a moment, I do want to talk about our schedule, because normally, and maybe somebody did ask the question, you just haven't had a chance to ask me, but people want to know, when is the train going to be operational? What I want people to understand is a few things. So I described how to kind of observe what's happening on the Dewatnow Bridge over the river and see the progress. Obviously, once the sidewalk gets across, that's in the river valley berms are removed and the parks are reestablished, that gives you an idea of when the project is coming to an end. And I did talk about that being spring and early summer next year. It's important to understand that Eric had kind of mentioned the commissioning happening in phases and happening in segments, and how the 66th Street area is going to see a lot more trains than maybe the rest of the alignment, because they happen to be the area that's first, and a lot of the testing that needs to happen maybe only once happens in that area, or it happens to a greater extent in that area. As the commissioning goes along, you'll see the train moving more and more and more further to the south, eventually crossing the river, eventually going through the tunnel and up into downtown. When you see the train getting to that point, that tells you that passenger service, or what we call service commencement, is imminent. Once the train can get all the way across the river, we do have some line-wide testing that we have to do just to make sure it operates from one end to the other and communicates correctly with all the systems. It's very technical. Eric can go into great more detail than I can, but what's important for the public is just to recognize, when you want to know when are we going to go into operation, just pay attention to where you've most recently seen the train. When you're wanting to know, even before the train's there, you can pay attention to the overhead catenary system as those wires are being strung, and as you see the equipment working on that, that tells you that commissioning is about to start. So at the end of the day, I can tell you that the trains will be running in 2021. That is our goal. We just cannot give you an exact date.
And there's going to be a lot of running, and I think that's important for people to know. So a lot of verification to be done to make sure that you can enjoy that for a very long time.
That's right. It's more important to us. Like, good point. Thank you, Eric. This presentation is a little longer than I planned, but there's a lot of good information here. And one of the things I want to make sure that our viewers and listeners know is Transit is not here just to build this project. We're here to operate it for the next 30 years in partnership with the city. That's what this contract requires, and that's what we're here for. So for the next 30 years, we want to make sure, just like the city does, that this is the absolute best system possible, that it's built to the highest standards. We don't want to take any shortcuts, and we have no intention of taking any shortcuts. And if that means that we have to take a little bit longer to construct it and make sure and verify that everything works great, and that delays service commencement, that is far more important to us than opening the trains to passengers prematurely.
Oh, I think we lost Dallas there.
I'm still here.
I'm still here.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, you had faded off a little bit. Well, thank you so much, Dallas and Eric. We appreciate your time and your knowledge and sharing it with everyone who was able to tune in today and all the people who are watching the presentation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We really appreciate you taking the time to come for this virtual project update in our new normal. And we thank you for your understanding and patience as the project continues to progress along the entire alignment. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email at info@transitlrt.ca or give us a call at 780-224-0964. I'm aware that there are a lot of questions that did come in that have not been answered, but we shall be sending you emails with answers to your questions. Yeah, thank you. And please fill in the survey that will come in your email and just at the end of this presentation as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.